let's hop right in and let's talk a little bit about SANDAG. And SANDAG is the San Diego Association of Governments. And this is where, our local county leaders, they have one representative per city, and they typically will vote or, pass legislation where all the local governments can cooperate. And often it's usually about transportation initiatives, whether it's expansion of the freeways or funding of light rail or mass transit, or it's usually transportation is the dominant issue for these folks on SANDAG. And for the longest time, they had a proposal that they were considering to charge drivers by the mile. And a lot of people really freaked out about that idea. They're like, you can't charge us for driving per mile. That's an invasion of our privacy. That's discouraging driving. And oh, by the way, you just want to take all the money and invest it in mass transit and, subways and trains. And you're essentially taxing card people to pay for public transit people. And there was a lot of people that were really upset about it. Well, apparently it's now off the table. So SANDAG has scrapped this idea for a mileage tax. And it was meant as a financing mechanism, not only for mass transit, but it was also a technique to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce that carbon footprint in San Diego. I mean, what do you think of this idea? Now, I have mixed feelings about it. On one level, I think, you should pay for what you use. So if you're using the roads, you should pay for the roads. But on the other level, charging you by every mile you drive sounds, conceptually acceptable, especially if it were a replacement for the gas taxes and all the other taxes that are used to fund mass transit and fund the roads. But first of all, that this mileage tax would not be a replacement for all those things. It would just be an added layer on top of the existing gas tax and all the other taxes that funds transportation and mass transit. But how, even if you were to do this, I mean, how would you do it? And how would you do it in a way that would not violate people's privacy? Because if you were to have a mileage tax, I mean, would you put a GPS unit in every car so you could see where they drive? I mean, that would be intrusive. Would you check the odometer, when you go and have your smog check? That's a possibility, but those can be tampered with. There really hasn't been an explanation on how they were going to charge per mile. But I'm generally okay with the idea of pay for what you use and pay in proportion to the amount you use it. But this proposal for the mileage tax got such a heavy pushback from people that the SANDAG voted against it 15-4. I think that's good. I'm happy to hear that. And the idea behind the fee is to have a funding source to supplement the gas tax revenue. And I'm reading from the Union Tribune article here. And yeah, exactly. It's not a replacement for the gas tax. It's on top of the gas tax, which is dwindling with the proliferation of more fuel efficient and battery powered vehicles. Well, let me address this right now. There's a misconception with electric vehicles. I'm a big EV guy. I'm a big proponent for EVs. And we'll often hear so many myths about EVs. And one of the common myths is that these guys are freeloaders. They don't pay for the roads because they don't pay for the gas, and therefore they don't pay a gas tax. Well, that's true. Electric vehicle drivers don't pay a gas tax. However, electric vehicle drivers pay an additional line item layer on our annual registration fee, for our car. And I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's like around $100 a year, something like that. You might argue that's not enough, and that's certainly debatable. And it's not in proportion to usage, but still EV drivers do pay for the roads. To say nothing of all the income taxes and property taxes and sales taxes that EV drivers spend on to fund roads. But yeah, definitely cars are getting more efficient, so less revenue is coming from the gas tax. And, these central planners here in SANDAG are freaking out about that. And like, they had this grand vision for subways and tunnels and light rail, elevated overpasses, and this, utopian system that was going to cost a ton of money and radically transform the way San Diego culture like works, the way the whole system works. They specifically said, we want to discourage people from driving, because of carbon emissions. They want more people on mass transit and all of this. And part of the plan is that Sandag had reimagined this idea of these kind of walkable communities that had integrated commercial and residential space, pedestrian friendly villages, bike lanes, and that sort of thing, which all I think is a great idea. But a lot of these mass transit initiatives, I mean, you got to lay rail, and that's expensive. And when you put in rail, your train car can only go where the rail is. So as a result, you still can't always get to where you want to go. I mean, granted, if you want to build a rail system like New York City or like Tokyo, you'd have to install so many miles of track that it would take forever, and it would be unbelievably disruptive. And frankly, I don't think they're ever going to get anywhere near that kind of density or that kind of market coverage. And that's why I've always said, self-driving cars are the solution here, because you don't need to build more infrastructure. You can still get people emitting less carbon when the self-driving cars are EVs. You can still have more walkable, pedestrian-friendly communities, and people could just hail cars as they need them. And that would still work, and it would work a lot more efficiently than what we've got. But there is this romantic idea with trains that's unbelievable. So the plan that was scrapped was that they were going to have a 3.3 cent per mile gas tax. You might be thinking, okay, how much is that? And I did the math. And so if you drive 15,000 miles a year, which is basically what I drive, that's $495 a year. Now, you might say, Riley, you just said that your fee on your DMV registration every year is only, and I wish I had the exact number in front of me, but it's only about an extra $100. But really, you should owe $495 a year if you're driving 15,000 miles. Well, first of all, this is in addition to the existing gas taxes and to fund all of this mass transit that I wouldn't use, number one. Number two, a lot of those miles are when I'm on a road trip, when I'm driving up to San Francisco. I've taken my EV to Albuquerque, to Ely, Nevada, up in Northeast Nevada. I've driven to Vegas and Tahoe and Reno and Sacramento and San Francisco. I love EV road trips. Well, the Sandag shouldn't get taxed by the mile for all the miles I drive outside of San Diego. And if you removed a lot of that, then I'm sure that my numbers are significantly less on a per mile basis. But, Amy Reichert, who's one of the candidates for San Diego supervisor, she's running that special election because Nathan Fletcher got in the sexual scandal and had all these other problems. She's been really loud about being against this Sandag tax, and, good for her. There's been other politicians, particularly the ones that live in maybe more affluent areas of San Diego or more rural areas of San Diego that tend to be more maybe Republican, that have been against this. But public, opinion has really shifted. And now public opinion has really driven Sandag to take this whole thing off the table. Now, some people spoke at the Sandag meeting and they said, San Diegans cannot afford to pay more to drive their vehicles. I say no to any road charge at any level, and I do not believe in being tethered as an American, being controlled in my driving habits. La Mesa council member Jack Hsu, who's in favor of the road user charge and advocates for higher fees in high traffic areas, argued that per mile charges are more equitable than the current gas tax, which he says penalizes people who cannot afford electric cars. Okay, that there is some truth to that. I mean, because EVs don't pay a per mile or even a per gallon. They just pay a flat rate. And you're right, that isn't proportional. But still, EVs are less than 5% of the market right now. And yeah, it's going to grow, but it's not going to become like 90%. Although I think that's what Gavin Newsom and a lot of other officials think they're going to get out of this. But anyways, I'm just happy that it's been shut off as an idea, because I don't think the way they would implement it would be fair or reasonable. Conceptually, I'm on board, if they did it the right way, but they won't. But it's just another social engineering scheme that I just didn't get. And we're always complaining about the cost of living and how expensive it is to live in California when it comes to housing and energy and transportation and insurance. And I mean, food prices, gas prices are $6 a gallon. Everything's so much more expensive. And a lot of this is because of the government policies that are implemented. And here's another case where they want to make it even more expensive. They're talking about equity. And I mean, this is going to harm a lot of blue collar guys that drive their trucks, to go to work. I mean, this is damaging and would only make the cost of living in San Diego higher. So tell me what you think. If you got some thoughts or comments on the live stream, just drop in your comment on Facebook or on YouTube. I'll see it here on my screen. We'll get you involved in the conversation.